Now, this morning, the full, and I'm assuming final trailer for Andor dropped. And I once again have to say, like I think I've said about all the trailers for Star Wars shows on Disney Plus so far, that this one looks good. It looks really good. And actually, out of all of them, all the trailers for all the shows, this one just might feel, or maybe I should say give the feeling or vibe of Star Wars the most. That kind of grand, epic feeling, I mean. Which is, yeah, maybe kind of strange or ironic that a series named after Andor, who, to be honest, is a rather obscure character, that it would end up giving more of an overall Star Wars vibe than the previous two when you consider they were named after and featured Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, two of the most iconic characters in the entire franchise, to say nothing of the fact that Vader was also in the Kenobi series. And no, I'm certainly not saying the trailers for those shows and the shows themselves didn't in any way capture the feeling of Star Wars at all or anything like that. Obviously, there are few things more Star Wars than Kenobi versus Vader. It's just that with both of them, both the last two series as well as The Mandalorian before them, they all just ended up kind of feeling, in my opinion, small when it comes to scope and scale. Small, that is, for a franchise that calls itself something as bold as Star Wars, and that is known for galaxy-spanning trilogies where the fate of virtually everything is always on the line in an epic battle of good versus evil. To put it simply here, there just hasn't been a whole lot of Star Wars in the Star Wars shows on Disney Plus so far. Which isn't to say you can't or shouldn't ever do smaller character stories in or with Star Wars. In fact, one of the great things about the franchise, one thing that's always been done really well in Star Wars, is telling smaller character stories with these huge epic backdrops, or with galaxy-spanning conflicts taking place that the characters are wrapped up in and affecting in some capacity. And though, again, you don't always need to go epic in scope and scale, and I very much enjoyed the first two seasons of The Mandalorian, which is a smaller story, and I even think the Book of Boba Fett could have been nothing more than a story of personal vengeance, and that Kenobi could have been a smaller story where he never even leaves Tatooine. It was nice to see a trailer that really felt like, well, like a war in the stars was taking place. But that also, in true Star Wars fashion, it will seemingly primarily focus on the characters, and quite a few of them by the looks of it. I think one of the things I appreciated the most about this trailer is it looks like there's going to be quite a bit of complexity and intrigue to the story, that we're going to be following multiple characters, unlike all the other live-action Star Wars shows thus far, which have really only mainly focused on one character. And really, this trailer kind of gave me a Game of Thrones in space vibe, where we'll explore a war and struggle for power from multiple different points of view and from multiple different positions of power, or lack thereof, of power, which is great. I think Star Wars is well suited for something just like this. The only issue with it, in this particular case, is there won't be quite as much tension as there could be, considering a lot of the characters, most of the characters actually, well, we know what their fates ultimately have to be. I mean, we know where characters like Cassian and Mon Mothma are ultimately going to end up. We know that nothing all too bad can happen to them in this series, like being killed, which isn't to say that ruins absolutely everything and it's going to be terrible, but I really think a show like this set in a different era, a Game of Thrones style show set in the Old Republic, for example, could be pretty amazing. But I digress. And all that said, there does seem to be quite a few brand new characters, including the one Stellan Skarsgård will be playing, and who was in the trailer quite a bit. And by the looks of it, and from what we've heard elsewhere, he's basically going to be a main character in this. It looks like he'll be the one to bring Cassian into the actual rebellion, and is a character who could, and likely will, I'd wager, end up dead before this is all said and done. Though something tells me that his wife will end up dying first, or be killed or taken prisoner by the Empire. At least that's kind of the impression I was getting from the trailer. It looks as if he's either a senator or someone else important on Coruscant who's getting tired of the Empire, and that his wife is kind of worried about him and what he's up to and what he's been saying. He'll then end up on the Empire's bad side, and she'll be the one to actually pay the price, which is when he leaves, and he does seem to be on the run in the trailer, or he seems to be trying to escape. And then he will kind of start the rebellion on more of a ground level. Or who knows, maybe his wife betrays him and tells the Empire what he's up to. That's always a fun angle to take. Either way, and speaking of Coruscant, that is one of the things I'm most looking forward to in this series, going back to that planet again. I know we see it quite a bit in the Clone Wars, so it's not like we haven't been there in forever or since the prequels, but I can't wait to get back to it in live action, and back into the Senate building to dig into the state of affairs in the galaxy at this point, to see how much has changed in the past 15 years or so. And considering this series is supposed to quite literally lead right into the beginning of Rogue One, and that Rogue One, of course, leads right into A New Hope, well, we'll likely eventually, at the end, see the very moment the Imperial Senate gets disbanded, probably gets disbanded in a big announcement by Palpatine himself, which is all mentioned by Tarkin in A New Hope. And speaking of Tarkin, I'm not going to be surprised at all when he shows up in this as well, just like he did in Rogue One. Same goes for, as I was just saying, Palpatine showing up probably from time to time and being that kind of ever-present shadow in the background. In fact, there's the potential for all sorts of appearances and cameos in this series. Even a character like Ahsoka could end up showing up. I mean, she was, according to the Ahsoka novel, which has seen some of it retconned lately. But anyway, according to that book, she was the very first Fulcrum agent, and I don't think that's going to change. And since we know Cassian also was a Fulcrum agent, it's not impossible for their paths to cross at some point. And then when you factor in she has a show of her own coming up next year, and that not everybody is overly familiar with this character, not everyone has seen Clone Wars and knows everything about Ahsoka, well, it does make sense to bring her in and maybe kind of hype up that show for some people who are not, again, familiar with that character. Whatever the case may be with that, one previous character we absolutely know is returning, thanks to the trailer, is Saw Gerrera, played again by Forrest Whitaker, which isn't surprising in the least that we'd see more of him and his extremist group of rebels known as the Partisans. That we'll likely see his more radical approach kind of contrasted against Mon Mothma's approach to his, I'm guessing, still at this point hopeful that somehow, someway the Senate can kind of change things back to the way they were, reestablish the Republic. Though by the end of it, and again, the Senate will be disbanded at the end, she will realize that more has to be done. She will then, of course, be a founding member of the rebellion, as we already know. Anyway, though sure we could kind of go through this trailer frame by frame and try to analyze every little detail and extrapolate every little piece of info we could, quite honestly, there's really not much to note in the trailer. It was all pretty vague and gave more of a general feel than digging too much into plot details, other than a few things we can kind of infer, again, about Stellan Skarsgård's character and how Andor's story or early story will likely play out. The trailer seems to be giving us a few hints and clues about how Andor joins the fight in the first place, a fight that, thanks to Rogue One, we know he's been fighting since he was 6 years old. And it pretty much seems like the Empire comes to his planet, strip mines it, and I'm guessing something happens to his sister and probably the rest of his family, and then it's all about revenge for the rest of his life for him. And he ultimately gets recruited again by Stellan Skarsgård's character and becomes a Fulcrum agent, and then, well, that's what the rest of the series will fill in. There's also then a few other characters, including an ISB agent who appears to have at least a somewhat big and important role to play, likely as a foil to either Mon Mothma or Stellan Skarsgård's character, or both. Likely she's going to be trying to snuff out rebels within the Empire or within the Senate and so on. That's what ISB agents do. It also seems like some sort of local or planetary security officer of some kind, who we also saw in the first teaser trailer, that they could have a rather significant role to play in all of this as well. And again, like I was saying before, this to some extent does have that kind of Game of Thrones vibe or feel, where you'll see a conflict or war presented from many different points of view or perspectives. Maybe not as many as that show did. We, well, certainly won't get that many points of view. But this is quite clearly going to be more than just an Andor story. This is going to be a much larger story about many different characters, which, again, I'm excited for. I think one of the problems with the other Disney Plus series is that they, again, kind of are narrow in their focus and scope. Either way, I have to say this looks good and potentially really good. This could, in theory, be the best of the Disney Plus Star Wars shows, even better than The Mandalorian, which is high praise or high hope, I guess you could say. And yes, I know trailers have looked good before and the actual shows have turned out to be less than good. So maybe I'm a fool, maybe I'm someone who likes to get their hopes up only to have them crushed. Maybe I'm just being hopeful for the sake of being hopeful because, yes, I do love Star Wars and I do want to see it succeed and be good under Disney, even if I'm not a huge fan of Disney. Maybe I just want some really good Star Wars to watch again, and after arguably Kenobi and Boba Fett were not nearly as good as they could have been, I just, again, want some good Star Wars to enjoy. I don't know, or maybe this will be a huge disappointment. It's hard to say until we actually get to see it. But again, the trailer makes this look like it could be really good. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of this trailer and what your hopes and or fears are for the series. Does this look good to you, or are you wondering why it's even being made, possibly? Whatever the case may be, leave your comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.